With the New York Giants season slipping away, the Giants need to be sellers at the October 31st trade deadline. I have for you some potential trade ideas, including cap savings and possible trade partners. Plus, I have one player that's on the list that I really don't think the Giants should trade. I'll tell you all about it coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL for a first deposit up to $100. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina, and a special shout out to all my everydayers, to my subtexters, to anybody who's new to the program. Thank you so much for making us part of your day, or in some cases, first listen of the day, first watch of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube. And on today's program, we have reached a point, ladies and gentlemen, in which it's time for me to talk about the Giants being sellers at the trade deadline. The trade deadline being October 31st. Now, in addition to just rattling off some names that I think the Giants should move, I'm going to take it a little bit further. I'm going to integrate some of the salary cap savings involved. We're going to take a look at the Giants salary cap picture for next year, which is fluid, mind you, but this will help kind of set the stage for what I think is going to happen in the offseason. We're going to talk about for these various guys that I've identified that I think should be on the trade block and maybe on the trade block. I'm going to tell you where I think they would be the best fit and who would replace them potentially if the Giants do move on from them. We'll talk about the savings involved. So just basically, we're going to expand this whole thing. So if you like salary cap stuff, the financials, you're going to like the show, hopefully. So thank you again for tuning in. I've got 4 guys that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about 2 this segment, 2 next segment. And then I've got one guy that I think everybody is saying that Giants should trade. I don't think they should, and I will explain why when we get to the third segment, and then we'll kind of wrap things up and send you into the weekend. All right, so let's get started on the list. All right, now just a little background here. In calculating the savings that the Giants will stand to gain if they trade these players, what I did was I went and I took the base salary plus any per game roster bonuses, divided that by 17 in order to get a per week or a weekly value. Then I took that and I multiplied that by 9 because October 31st just comes after week 8 of the NFL season. So that means there's 9 weeks left for the rest of the season, 9 games left, possibly even 10. I mean, I think the way they break it up is they spread it out over 18. The NFL paycheck gets spread out over 18, but I did it over 17. So the numbers are going to be a little bit off, but you'll get an idea of what it stands to be. Now, just real quick, the number that I came up with the 4 trades that I'm going to propose would open up $18.451 million savings on the Giants cap. That would go into effect this year. Going to be more than enough than what they would need to get through the rest of the year. However, that money can carry over to next year, as you guys know. And just to look at the 2024 cap picture for the Giants, they currently are scheduled this per over the cap to have $38.498 million of effective cap space and $56.046 million total cap space. Effective cap space is what they need in order to accommodate everybody under the top 51 rule that goes into effect at the start of the next league year. So the reason why this money is going to benefit the Giants is, I don't have to tell you guys, they're going to need a lot of help next year. They're going to need some offensive linemen. They probably will need some help on the defense. So the more money they can open up, the better. Right. So that's a little background for you before we get into these trades. So let's get into trade number one. Leonard Williams is the top of my list. All right. Now, Leonard Williams, $32 million base salary. I'm sorry, 32.5 million cap hit. My bad. And I believe his base salary is something like 18 million. So if the Giants were to move him after, within the next 2 weeks, say by that October 31st trade deadline, they would be looking at a savings of 9.529 million. Right? That's the prorated base salary that now would transfer to whatever team acquires him. What team could potentially be in the market for Leonard Williams? There's one that I came up with, but it's contingent kind of on what this team does in its next two games. And that team is the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, the Raiders, I believe, have the Patriots and then I think the Bears. I think if they win those two games, they could potentially be in the market for an interior defensive lineman, a defensive lineman like Williams who could play, across the board there. So to me, that makes the most sense if the Giants are going to look to move Williams. Now, I can't sit here and tell you what he might bring back in terms of draft picks. I will say this much, as you guys know, the Giants only have 6 draft picks for next year. Right? They don't have a 7th rounder right now. They aren't getting any comp picks. So by moving some of these guys out and getting more draft picks, that's only going to help the Giants as they continue this rebuild that, desperately needs an infusion of more talent. All right. So Leonard Williams is my first candidate. I think Las Vegas makes the most sense for him. Depending on, of course, whether the Raiders win their next 2 games. If they don't, then I'm not so sure how much more interest or where Leonard Williams could maybe even fit elsewhere around the league. But that would be number one, 9.529 million savings minimum. All right. Player number 2. And this one pains me because I like him. He's one of the co-captains, as is Williams. I really had hopes that this young man would work out here, but I just don't know that he's going to be in the future for this team. And that is safety Xavier McKinney. Now, McKinney, if he is traded by the October 31st deadline, would only yield a savings of $928,711. It's not much, but you know what? It adds up. And again, if you could get some nice draft picks, like a day 2 or high day 3 draft pick, might be worth it to the Giants, especially if they're not planning to re-sign him, which right now I'm not so sure if they're planning that. I think they had hoped to, but McKinney, hasn't really, I guess, made a strong enough case so far for another contract. So I'm not so sure he's brought back. And then here's the other thing, folks. The Giants have Dane Belton that I think they want to get into the mix here. So maybe they can afford to let McKinney go. Put Dane Belton in the lineup with Jason Pinnock and maybe draft another safety, somewhere along the line. I know they've got veteran Bobby McCain. I don't know that he's long-term for this team, but maybe just upgrade that whole safety unit, which hasn't been horrible, but maybe, there's going to be that quote unquote changing of the guard there. All right. So where could the Giants maybe look to trade McKinney? I'll give you 3 teams. I think Denver could be a possibility. Denver, if I'm not mistaken, let's see, Justin Simmons has struggled for them. I think they've got a couple guys that are hurt, Caden Stearns and Kawan Williams. I think Kawan Williams is on IR, so Denver could potentially need some help there. Of course, Denver might be in the same boat as the Giants. They might say, you know what, we're going to be sellers. We're not going to be buyers at the trade deadline. But maybe if Denver's looking to build for the future, maybe they take on a guy like Xavier McKinney if he is made available. Another team that could potentially look for an upgrade at safety are the Colts. Their safeties haven't been really good from what I understand. And then Packers is another team that maybe could use some safety help. So that's 3 teams that maybe would be a fit for a trade for Xavier McKinney if the Giants decide to move him and if they get, an offer for him that represents fair value. So McKinney, like I said, he was a guy, or he is a guy that I wish they could find a way to, to keep. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. And if you can trade him and get something for him, I think you've got to look into it if you're the Giants, especially as your season continues to slide down the tubes. All right, coming up next, I've got two more for you. And really no surprises here, I don't think, but we'll talk about it when we come back right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you are looking for a fun and different way to play fantasy football this season, you need to check out Prize Picks. Just pick two or more players, predict their stats, and sit back and see how they perform. It takes less than 60 seconds to make an entry, and best of all, you can turn a few bucks into some nice cash with the right projections. Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app known for its quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and wide selection of players and stat types. And they offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, when each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So what are you waiting for? Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and that promo code is LockedOnNFL for your first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got me, Patricia Traina, P-Train, and thankfully, over my head cold. Probably the best I felt in 2 weeks since getting the head cold. So thank you to everybody who sent kind words, wishing me a speedy recovery. I think I am over the hump now, and let's hope that I don't have to deal with a head cold for a while now, because they are a drag. But anyway, before we get into these next two guys who are on the possible trade lists with the trade deadline coming up, just real quick, tonight, Locked On Giants Live returns. Traina, Tana, and Dog. That's right. We're going to have the three of us online. We're going to have venting sessions, therapy sessions, whatever you want to call them, because this season has just been an absolute drag, a disappointment. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll, of course, answer your questions as we always do. We'll try to make it as fun as we can. I know nobody really wants to talk about the Giants these days. I know a lot of people are upset with the way the season's going. Trust me, folks, I feel the same way. It's so much more fun when the team is winning than when they're losing. It just makes my life easier. It makes my job easier. And unfortunately, here we are again. So we'll deal with it as best as we can. And it'll start with Locked On Giants Live, which we hope to see you. So Locked On Giants Live will be 7:30 on the YouTube channel, and we'll run till about 9:30 since Dog has the Lakers he's got to cover. So that's the plan for tonight. All right, let's get back to our list of Giants that I think will be on the trade block should the Giants decide they want to be sellers by the October 31st NFL trade deadline. And I would be surprised if they're not sellers. This team, I don't have to tell you, you guys see it. This team is not very good. And you've got a bunch of guys who are in the final year of their contract, who really are probably not part of the future moving forward. Why not see if you can get something for them? Maybe another team could use their talents. And it's not like, the other team is going to absorb the full contract. So, there's a trade-off, granted, but there's also a benefit to moving some of these guys. So we're going to talk about two more in this segment. And I'm going to start with cornerback Adoree Jackson. All right. Now, Adoree Jackson, he's in the final year of his contract with the Giants. He's got a voidable year next year. Given where the Giants are at, now I get it. Adoree is probably the Giants' best cornerback right now. Although Deonte Banks is making a case to overtake him in that regard. But if you're the Giants and your season is basically sliding down the tubes, why not take advantage of, what's left and get these younger guys reps, get them ready, get Trey Hawkins back in the lineup and get him coached up and see if he can't maybe improve, continue working with Cordell Flott, Have Darnay Holmes, who is your slot cornerback, continue to work on his craft. I don't know if he's in the long-term future, but, maybe work him in there. Maybe Aaron Robinson comes back in the next few weeks. Aaron Robinson is still on PUP, kind of been a forgotten guy, but maybe they bring him back. Who knows? So Adoree Jackson, if you move him by the deadline, you are looking at a potential cap savings of $6.352 million. And that includes $5.823 on his base salary. And because he has a roster bonus for every game he is active, that would be $529,411 remaining on that roster bonus. So that would be a nice little chunk of change if the Giants can move him. Now, who could maybe be in the running for Adoree Jackson? How about this weekend's opponent, the Buffalo Bills, right? They lost Tre'Davious White for the year with an injury. I believe Christian Benford is also banged up. So, the Bills are going to be in contention. They're probably going to be looking to shore up some of their weak areas on their team. So maybe, and especially given the Joe Shane, Brandon Beane relationship, maybe there's room there for a trade. All right. And in the process, like I said, the Giants can save roughly $6.352 million on Adoree Jackson if they look to move him. All right. One more guy I'll give you real quick. Parris Campbell, wide receiver. Now, Parris Campbell, this is interesting. When they signed him, I didn't hate the move. I understood why they signed him, because they didn't know if Wan'Dale Robinson would be, fully healthy and ready to go. They didn't know what was going to happen with Sterling Shepard. So they have had Parris Campbell, who is, more of a deep threat type of speedster, doing these gadget plays, and now there's talk that maybe he's going to participate as part of the, as a punt returner. To me, I just don't think that Parris Campbell, I don't want to say is a fit, but I think it's redundant to have him on the roster. Wan'Dale Robinson is healthy. Yes, I know he was on the injury report this week, but he's healthy. That was more of a maintenance thing. You brought back Sterling Shepard, but yet you buried the guy. I don't know why they're burying the guy. All right. So why not say to yourself, okay, you know what? We've got Wan'Dale, who could be our slot guy or our gadget guy. We've got Jalen Hyatt, who can be our deep threat guy when we need a deep threat guy. We've got Shepard, who can stand back there and field punts, and we don't have to worry about him. So where exactly does Parris Campbell fit into the mix? I don't know. I just see him as a redundant player. I like the guy, but he's redundant on this roster. So why not look to move him? All right. So if you look to move him, what are we looking at in terms of savings? We are looking at, let me see, $1.641 million. Right. So that would be $741,176 off the base salary and $900,000 for the roster bonus for each game he is active on game day. So that's not bad. That's not bad, that amount. It's money that can go towards the pot. Now, where could they maybe look to send Parris Campbell? I thought the Panthers might be a possibility. Now, I know the Panthers are struggling too, but, if they're looking to upgrade and get speed and, help that young team start to take shape, maybe a veteran like Parris Campbell might be just what the doctor ordered. So, a bit of a gamble. I understand that, but he's a guy I would look to move. Not because he's a bad guy to have in the locker room, but like I said, I think he's just redundant to have in the locker room. And, at the time when they signed him again, I understood it, but, things have changed. So you've got to change with the times. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. And right now, it looks like the Giants are starting to be left behind, which isn't good. All right. Coming up next, there's a player that I haven't mentioned. I'll tell you who it is right now. Saquon Barkley. A lot of people are like, why haven't you mentioned Saquon Barkley as a potential trade target? I'll tell you why. I haven't mentioned him. Coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, you never know when the unexpected is going to pop up, causing you or a loved one to fall ill. But now you don't need to be underprepared when you have Jase Medical. This doctor-created, doctor-recommended services Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase case is to fill out a simple online form and, in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of their board-certified physicians. You'll then get prescriptions and life-saving medication delivered straight to your door. Jase handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. And now you can get $20 off your Jase case by using promo code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. And that promo code for $20 off is locked on. Hey, Giant fans, football season is well underway, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Every Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and much more. Plus, get in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know their teams better than anybody else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any of the Locked On NFL YouTube channels. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You've got me, Patricia Traina, P-Train, and we're talking about the trade deadline. Potential targets. We've named 4 already on this podcast. I'm going to talk about one guy that I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, why didn't I mention him as part of my 4? Make him number 5 on the list. And that is running back Saquon Barkley. Now, this one was kind of tough because I don't know necessarily that Saquon Barkley is going to be back next year. I hope he is. I don't know that he is. You take a look at how the Giants played hardball with him with this, the contract negotiations, now that the team is probably not going to make the playoffs. Barkley hasn't been able to stay healthy. The Giants probably are not going to have to pay him out the maximum amount on that modified franchise tag deal that they signed him to. So you kind of wonder if Saquon at the end of the year is just going to say, you know what? I'm done with you, Giants. I'm going to go out on the market. Jonathan Taylor got paid. I can get paid too. That might be his mindset. I'm not saying that he's going to get paid. I understand, the concern with the injuries and all that stuff. But if you're Saquon Barkley, you're not going to doubt yourself. He doesn't doubt himself. So that being said, why didn't I include Saquon in my list of guys that should be traded? Because right now, folks, if this team is to have any sort of momentum, and again, I don't think this team is going to go to the playoffs. I don't know how many games this team is going to win given the problems on the offensive line and just everything that's happened, the injuries, you name it. But if you're looking to maybe, keep things running, it's kind of like, if you have a car and you sell it for parts, but you still want to have the car running, the last thing you want to do is get rid of the engine or anything to do with the engine. You might get rid of, the bumpers or I don't know, the headlights or whatever. I'm not a big car aficionado, but I know there are certain parts of a car that you could ship away and it won't affect whether the car operates or not. So that being said, Barkley is part of the engine, in my opinion. Right? So let me give you some numbers. Number 1, the Giants rushing yardage. Now, altogether, the Giants have rushed for 461 yards on 124 carries. Most of them, of course, being the running backs, some of them being Daniel Jones. That's a 3.717 average. Now, if you take out the scrambles by Daniel Jones, because those are not planned runs, They're just plays that broke down, and really you don't count them when you're looking at rushing yardage. So that amounts to 18 scrambles for 150 yards that you have to deduct from the total, which brings the Giants' numbers down to 311 yards on 106 carries, a 2.93 average. That's without Saquon really being in the lineup these last 3 games or so. All right. Now, with Saquon, one of the problems, I think, with this Giants team is the lack of quality depth they have at certain positions, starting with running back, right? You have Saquon, and then you have everybody else right now. Saquon is the only running back that gives them a home run threat, who gives them the versatility of being, dangerous out of the backfield as a receiver, who can block decently, who can get yards after contact. He's averaging 3.28 yards after contact, which is the best amongst all the runners. He has forced 5 missed tackles. I mean, you trade Saquon, and what do you have left? Saquon's presence helps Daniel Jones, right? To me, they go hand in hand. So, if you're going to keep Daniel Jones, and I think the Giants are going to have to this year as well as next year because of his contract, having Saquon there can help Daniel Jones. And not just in terms of, rushing the ball, not just in terms of catching the ball, but when you have Saquon on the field, he gives the defense something to worry about. So now maybe they can't assign a spy to Daniel Jones to stop him from executing plan runs, right? So, you look at the yardage with Saquon in the lineup by Daniel Jones versus out of the lineup, there's a big difference. So I just think that, Saquon and Daniel Jones, I suspect they're tied at the hip. And if you can get another year out of them, and I know some of you are like, nope, let's move on from Daniel Jones. But folks, I really don't think he's going anywhere given the way his contract is structured. You try and make the best of it and see what happens. Now, will the Giants be able to do it? I don't know. They would probably have to come up and match what Jonathan Taylor got from the Colts, but we'll see if maybe the Giants have their own little epiphany regarding, their thought process on Saquon Barkley. And yes, I know about the injuries, but, they happen. Andrew Thomas got paid, and look, he's missed a quarter of the season already. Injuries happen. You don't plan on them, but they do happen. So, all right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Don't forget, Friday night, tonight, Locked On Giants Live. We're starting at 7:30 p.m. on the YouTube channel. Trina, Tana, Dog, hope to see you there. Hope to interact with you. Thank you so much for making today's episode of Locked On Giants your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. If I don't see you tonight, have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you on Monday with a new episode of Locked On Giants.